Okay, welcome everyone. Thank you very much for joining us to this Meet the Editors panel. We have a great lineup of journals and editors here today. I'm gonna quickly introduce everyone, including myself, and tell you a little bit about how we're running the session. You can obviously see my name is Stephanie Decker. I'm the chair for this session. And we have with us today Douglas Cummings for the British Journal of Management, Marion Isset-White and Dermot Breslin for IJMR, the International Journal of Management Reviews, Christopher Wickett from the Journal of Management Studies, Sarah Robertson from the European Management Journal, and Tomasz Mikiewicz from Entrepreneurship Theory and Practice, and last but not least, Martina Humann from the International Journal of Project Management. So these experts are here today to answer your questions. You'll be able to do that through the conference platform. If you look at the screen to your right, there is a live Q&A field. If you could please put your questions in there. So that's the easiest for us to actually follow what questions are being posed. You can upvote them. There's also a discussion forum. Feel free to put some messages in there. However, if you put questions in there, we might not spot it. We'll do our best, and that's why really make sure you put them in the Q&A, please. For any questions you're posing, can you please make sure if it's a specific question to address it to the editor, because you can see we have quite a lot of editors here. They present a lot of combined knowledge about their journals and the editorial process in general. So if you can ask specific questions, that would really help us. The journal editors today will not be presenting their journals in the format that you know. We have already given you a video where the journal editors have pre-recorded introductions to their journals. If you haven't seen those yet, if you click on session information, there's a link to go there. This will be available after the conference as well. So if you heard about a journal that maybe you weren't that interested in before, you can also go back and look at that. And this is really today a session that is all about your questions. So what we will be doing is each editor will very briefly introduce their journal and just with 5 minutes give you the most important pointers, so you know that, and the more meaty, the more substantive information you'll find in the pre-recorded video. So very importantly, I also wanted to highlight that our session today has been sponsored by the European Management Journal. We're very thankful for that. Sarah is here to represent that journal. And yeah, I think this is all I needed to tell you for today before we can hand over to our editors. I've introduced them already, and if Colette in the background, if you could start the PowerPoint, then I would start handing over to our editors for each of them to do a quick 5-minute presentation about their journal, starting with Doug.
Perfect. Thank you very much for the opportunity to be part of this excellent session. Thank you for organizing this session. I'm very fortunate to represent the British Journal of Management. The British Journal of Management is a society journal, so it's one of two of the British Academy of Management's journals. And that's very important because the society journals have a very well-represented process that ensures good principles about editor conduct, author conduct, reviewer conduct, et cetera, are followed. And it's very terrific process for management of the journal. Currently, there's one editor-in-chief, but we're going to be looking for possibly 1 to 2 more over the coming few months. We have 13 associate editors, 111 editorial board members from 27 countries, publishing 4 issues a year. And the journal has been represented in over 5,600 institutions globally, and we had almost 500,000 downloads in 2020. Our impact factor has been rising a lot. It's currently a little bit over 6.5, and we have an ABCD rank, ABDC ranking of A, and the ABS ranking of 4. A terrific managing editor, Emma Misson, really keeps the journal running smoothly. And the journal publishes all types of papers. So we're open, very inclusive around the world. We accept papers in all functional areas of business. So anything from marketing, human resource management, finance, entrepreneurship, international business strategy, and the like. We take all areas, so very inclusive, consistent with the principles of BAM. The only type of paper that we do not take is a review paper. We have a sister journal with BAM that considers review papers. That's the International Journal of Management Reviews, an excellent journal with a terrific impact factor and excellent editors. So if you have a review paper, please consider IJMR. Our scope is that we'll publish papers that are qualitative, quantitative. We have papers that, in fact, a dedicated methodology corner papers where new methods that could either be quantitative or qualitative approaches are considered. And those methodology corner papers are really tend to be very high impact. So we encourage those submissions. And our associate editor team is a really terrific group of folks that very professional. They handle the papers on a very timely basis, and they represent the broad spectrum of all the possible areas of business and management. So when papers come in, if they're not in my area, but they better fit with one of the associate editors, then they take the papers, and the broad portfolio overall, each of the associate editors and the editor-in-chief are handling roughly an equal number of papers. So it's really a team effort done in conjunction with BAM and amongst the great reviewers and associate editors and authors alike. And again, great thanks to Emma Misson for really keeping everything on track. One last thing is we have an annual call for special issue proposals that's due in December. The proposals are due in December. The call is going to be released soon. If that's something of interest to you, please consider it as well. There's a panel that judges those submissions. So I don't want to take too much time. Our next speakers are for the International Journal of Management Reviews, and I will turn it over to them and listen to their great talk. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Doug. So as Doug said, I'm introducing the International Journal of Management Reviews. I'm here with the fellow co-editor, Marion Izzet-White, and also Jamie Callahan is our third editor-in-chief. So IJMR is just over 20 years old. We are an international literature review journal. We're one of the other BAM journals alongside BJM. And we only publish literature reviews. So our key focus is to publish literature reviews across any disciplinary area in business and management. So that's anything from, let's say, finance to international business to, HRM. We don't have a particular preference for any methodology that you might use in publishing a literature review. So we publish narrative reviews and systematic literature reviews and bibliometric analysis. But there's one thing that I would say about all our papers that we publish: they're very well read and very well downloaded quite a lot. So considering that we publish just over 24 papers a year, we have over 500,000 downloads, and that figure is going up. And it's a very international readership that we have. And also our papers are highly cited. So our latest impact factor is 13.4, and this puts us second in the business category and third in the management category in terms of impact factor. So what do you need to do to get published in IJMR? Well, the key thing is that you have to have a very thorough literature review. You need to go beyond the description of the literature to start to introduce and present your interpretation of that literature. So IJMR review papers need to challenge and shift perceptions and paradigms. And there are a number of ways in which you can do this. We have highlighted these in some of our editorials in the past, in our recent editorial. But really, all papers need to make a significant contribution to theory and to the advancement of theory within a particular area. So you might, for example, organize a literature according to certain frameworks or certain typologies. You might try to problematize a literature or identify contradictions within a literature. You might apply analogies or metaphors across disciplines, and this is really important for us because interdisciplinary literature reviews can be really important in terms of completely transforming the landscape across disciplines. And given that our field is a practice-focused field, ultimately, being in management, it's important that our theory is interdisciplinary in its foundations, and literature reviews can be a very good way of doing this. And our tagline is that our reviews are a strategic platform for new directions in research. So the literature reviews is the sort of foundation based on what the reviewer has seen in the past, but really they're presenting a completely new vision and direction for the particular literature in question. So that's basically an overview of IJMR. So thank you very much for that. So I will pass over to our next editor.
Yes, so hello everyone. It's a pleasure to represent the Journal of Management Studies here at the session. So probably most of you have come across the journal, and let me be just brief on some of the key recent highlights and facts and figures. So we did have a record number of submissions last year, which is about 1,500 that we got, including the special issues. And we expect that this year is about the same, maybe even a little bit higher. So we do have a lot to do as editors, as you can imagine. JMS has typically not one editor-in-chief, but 3 general editors who oversee the process. And at the moment, we have 10 associate editors. I'm one of those associate editors. I'm based in Europe, in the Netherlands, but we have a mix of editors from Europe, North America, and also a few editors from Asia. We do, even though we moved to Scholar One as a submission system, we do have a wonderful dedicated editorial office located in Durham, which is managed by Margaret and her team. Happily, our impact factor also increased quite a bit over the last years. Ranking is 4 in the HAG category, and it's an FT top 50 journal as well. What's probably also interesting for you is that we have an acceptance rate of about 4% and a desk reject rate of about 65%. Just some additional rates. So most of the research that we get is quantitative, about 2/3 of that. A bit less, maybe a quarter is qualitative, and the rest is conceptual work. We do accept review articles, but we don't get a lot of them. So we kind of encourage scholars to submit review articles also to JMS. We did publish quite a few very impactful ones in recent years, but we're not kind of as much as IJMR, for instance, a review journal. Just a few handy tips for getting past the editorial desk. So more information and more facts and figures also are in the video that's available to you. So what we kind of want to see when we get a submission is we want to see that you engaged with the journal and the conversation that's taking place in the journal. So are you, and we see it a bit more broadly. So it's not kind of narrowly constrained to JMS itself, but it's more organization and management theory. So are you engaging with one of the conversations that's going on in management and organization theory, and are you well, of course, contributing to that? So I do in fact get a lot of people, a lot of submissions that don't kind of cite at all any organization theory journal, and then that kind of signals to me, okay, they're not really contributing to a conversation that we care about as a journal of management studies. And that, of course, is linked to did the authors do their homework in terms of picking up, engaging with, and expanding research that has been taking place in JMS on the topic area. So, for example, if you write a study about CSR, we kind of also want to see that you engage with the CSR conversation that has been taking place in our journal. Another point is that, well, you want to make sure that your paper delivers what it promises. My general take is better undersell than oversell. So often there are very strong introductions, and then you look, okay, are the authors really kind of delivering what is kind of promised in the introduction? And sometimes that is just not the case. So you want to make sure that there's an overall coherence between what you offer or what you say you will offer as a contribution and what you actually offer as a theoretical contribution. What is important with respect to methods? So of course we want authors, and all journals want that, I suppose. We want that you demonstrate methodological rigor. What is important at JMS is that we're in principle ontologically and epistemologically open to any approach. That means we welcome any method, and we also welcome any theory that is adequate to examine and highlight a relevant phenomenon. So we're not constrained to a particular set of methodologies or even epistemology. So we have critical management studies papers, for instance, in that respect. What is important is that the JMS is still a general management studies journal, and we have a general management audience in that respect. So when you write and submit a paper with us, you want to kind of demonstrate to what extent is your case, the empirical case that you engage with, or the literature that you engage with, is that, to what extent is that relevant for general readership? And particularly our general readers, they care about the theoretical contribution. So you write about a very unique phenomenon, sustainability, leadership, entrepreneurship, whatever it is. But what we would look for is, to what extent is there a theoretical insight in your work that is relevant for somebody who probably, who maybe does not care about the phenomenon itself, but what is the theoretical insight that could be transferred to other conversations, for instance. What we also want to encourage authors is to come up with research that carries strong societal implications. So we recently published an editorial, which is titled Management Research That Makes a Difference, Broadening the Meaning of Impact, where we kind of join in the recently surging discussion about impactful research. And we try to offer some sort of how-to guide for authors to conduct research that is more impactful. So topics that deal with grand societal challenges is particularly welcome, given that this kind of research and the phenomenon that you engage with empirically is able to make a strong theoretical contribution to management studies. In that sense, we expect authors that their theoretical contributions are as clear as possible. What's also important to note is that at least for your initial submission, we at JMS, we prefer papers that are lively, interesting, and tackle important problems that have been under investigated or so, but where we see potential to develop them further, rather than a paper which is maybe methodologically very robust, but it's just a topic that is boring and has no sort of impact beyond academia in a narrow sense. We do have various social media initiatives, so there's more information also about our various article formats. So we have more to offer than the traditional journal article, even though that makes up most of what we publish. And we also have a YouTube channel and a blog, which I invite you very much to have a look at. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. So hello, everybody. It's my great pleasure to introduce the European Management Journal today. EJM is a joint venture between the University of Glasgow and ESCP Europe. And so I am representing Glasgow at the moment as editor-in-chief, and Minas Kastinakis is my co-editor. So we are a generalist management journal, very broad brush management journal. We have 13 to 14 associate editors representing the whole spectrum of management research, from HR to marketing to supply chain to accounting and finance, and all points in between. We like papers that actually talk to perhaps more than one subject within the management spectrum, and are accessible to generalist readers, people who are interested in management generally, not just particularly one specific subject area. So the implication of that is we encourage papers that are not too heavily jargony in terms of a particular subject area. Also, we like papers that encourage practitioners to engage and to read our journal. So we encourage papers to have a specific practitioner orientation, particularly towards the end of a paper, where we draw out a practitioner contribution, a contribution to practice. And again, we would encourage papers to be clearly written and not too highly academic in their language, to encourage wide participation. Okay, so we again are methodologically inclusive. We publish qualitative and quantitative papers. We publish review papers as well as empirical papers. And sometimes we also publish methodology papers, particularly those that have a particularly novel or interesting take on a particular methodology. We also do systematic review papers. As the European Management Journal, we are in some ways European in orientation, but we are also global. Our readership, our authorship, our reviewers, our associate editors come from all over the world. We encourage papers that build on European traditions or write about Europe, but that are applicable to other parts of the world, or vice versa. Papers that come from other traditions, build on other traditions, draw on other traditions, are empirical work from all over the world, but have some application to management and business within the European contexts. So we're glad to say that our impact factor has risen considerably over the last few years. It's now at 5.074, which is we're very excited about, happy about. And that, of course, has meant that our submissions has grown considerably in the last few years too. So we have about 1,000 submissions a year, and we're currently at a rejection rate of around 90%. I do all the tiraging, all the papers that come in, I look at, and I will desk reject about 75% of those, and then send the rest out to reviewers. So again, you know, I have a lot to say in my video about how to avoid desk rejection, but one thing I would say now is make sure you craft a good letter to the editor-in-chief who is doing all the tiraging, and make sure that the paper has a strong theoretical contribution and does connect with the debates and dialogues already in the journal. Okay, we do have quite a fast review speed. I try to make the first editorial decision within a week, whether it goes out to review or not, and then we encourage the review process to take about 16 weeks, and coming up to a full decision in 34. Obviously, things with COVID have slowed the process down a bit for I think all journals, not just our journal. We very much encourage early career academics to submit to our journals and to send their best papers, particularly work from their PhDs, which we find often is very rich in terms of empirical work and so on. And in order to do that, we have written a few editorials in the past that are particularly to support early career academics, early career authors in terms of, shaping your papers and so on. We also had a joint editorial a few years ago where all the editorial team wrote about what they would like to see in their area, in terms of novel, interesting, state-of-the-art papers. There are also some videos on the website where associate editors and former editors are talking about creativity within writing, how to avoid desk rejections, what European means in terms of the journal, and so on. We have six issues a year. One of those is always a special issue, and one of them contains a general one normal general issue also contains a management focus, which is like a mini issue, a mini special issue. We also, for every issue, have a perspectives piece, which is a thought piece as well, which is invited. So I think that's all I have to say for now. Please do consider EMJ as an outlet for your best papers, and please don't hesitate to contact me if you would like to discuss your papers at any point with me. Thank you. So I'll hand over now to Thomas from Entrepreneurship Theory and Practice.
All right. Thank you very much, Sarah. Well, ETP is high on various rankings, and you can read some of it on the screen. Probably the most, I would say, the most important for this is impact factor, because if you submit a paper to a journal, what you would like to see is basically that people read your paper and they cite it. So from that point of view, ETP is not a bad choice, because on average, you have a fair chance, if you get published, that the paper will have some impact. The other thing you can gain from submitting to us is basically speed. It works in two ways. One is more on negative side, one on the positive side. There is a pretty high desk rejection rate, but then that will happen very quickly, so you're not wasting time. We simply have no resources, and this is common to many top journals nowadays. We do not have resources, really. We do not have enough reviewers to send all papers for reviews. So more than 50% of papers will be desk rejected. Please don't feel offended that that happens to you. It's just we have no other way of doing it. However, if the paper get into reviews, again, the ambition of the editorial team is that you will get it back pretty quickly, and you should get good comments. And I think myself, most of the editors, not everybody, you will get pretty decent comments, not just only from the reviewers, but you will get developmental comments from the editors as well. We read papers that are submitted to us carefully, regardless if they are rejected or they go into revision. So now that links with another interesting question, which is how, because people send us papers realizing that there is not a fair, that basically they may not stand high chance just to get comments. This is absolutely fine. That's part of the process. That leaves us a discretion to have a first choice. But sometimes you can do the opposite. You can send it to another journal, you get comments, you get the paper better, send it to us. Because if you send it to us first, of course, the risk is you didn't see something. So what I'm trying to say is only don't send your papers too early. Don't, especially that relates to younger colleagues, get enough comments, get enough feedback, because you can never anticipate how the paper will be received in full, and therefore if ETP is your best fit, then don't waste it, don't send too early. Well, we accept papers on entrepreneurship. So basically, we are talking here about new firms, but not only new firms. For example, unlike our main competitors and friends in Journal of Business Venturing, we also accept papers in family business. So they may be existing companies if this is about family business, but please don't send us papers about existing companies full stop, because this is not really entrepreneurship. Unless it is about a country like Vietnam, where all private companies are new because liberalization happened relatively recently. But new firms, but of course, entrepreneurship is more than that. We also look for papers on aspects of entrepreneurship in existing companies. For example, like here on the top of the slide, you have examples of the most cited recent papers. One of them is on entrepreneurial orientation, which is a strategy concept. It's about existing companies. And so this is fine. And also we accept papers from the wide range of disciplines. We have a pretty large editorial team. So this is one other advantage. If you send us a paper, there's a fairly good chance you'll get somebody who actually understands what you write about. If you talk about myself, if you write a paper on institutions and entrepreneurship, there is a fair chance I will get your paper for handling. So what we look for novelty, or in other words, we look for a contribution, and this is probably the most limiting factors. The other factors which are critical, absolutely critical, the quality of your methods, the way you write it, the way you structure it, the way you write your introduction, all this is unnecessary conditions. But probably the most limiting factor is to find something genuinely new and original to contribute. And of course, people try to fake it. I mean, I'm not different than everybody else. We all try to fake it. We all try to pretend we have something really dramatic and novel to say, but it's not that easy to achieve. And I think Chris made that comment already. It's actually better to be modest, especially what is especially annoying from our point of view as editors, when you try to pretend that some literature does not exist. So we're writing about something similar in other people, and then you claim you are the first person who wrote about it. And actually, we read those papers. So don't do that, please. And also the other thing which is so common in top journals is basically people claiming novelty by trying to invent new vocabulary. And a lot of that is rather desperate, but of course sometimes they get published. So I'm not saying it's a bad strategy from that point of view, but it's just people try to invent new terminology, new words, talking about something, and sometimes this is quite problematic because they really do not have that much new to say, apart from again from inviting new words. For me, and I think for quite a few of my colleagues, new theory is about new arguments. Theory is about linking things together. Why things happen? Why one factor has impact on something else. So this is what really the core of theory is about. And coming with good argument is far more difficult than coming with pretentious terminology. And for example, what I always look at when I look at the paper, I start with the hypothesis and I look carefully if the hypothesis makes sense. And believe me, they often do not make sense because people not word them well. And the next step for me would be to see if they are actually supported by some sound arguments. And are those arguments interesting? Because again, everything can make sense, but it goes back to the question, is it really something new? So the kind of ideal paper, which is not often is difficult to achieve, is a paper which from one point of view says something new, but from the other point of view, the story is not too complex. The story is it's not like Ptolemy system when you have to add 550 circles to explain why the sun goes around the earth. It's not so the main idea is not necessarily difficult, but it still sounds original. And this is really the real challenge. This is really the ideal paper. When you say something new, but it resonates, it actually, you read it and you ask yourself why I didn't think about it myself first. Again, so it's a broad range of disciplines. It has to be something about entrepreneurship, but again, entrepreneurship is widely defined. It's mostly about new companies, about entrepreneurs, but not only. Probably I will stop here. I don't know if that was 5 minutes or 4 minutes, but I'm happy to ask any questions or just drop me an email. Thank you. And I think the Marian was patiently waiting and is our final presenter. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you for having me here. My name is Martina Wehmann, and I'm presenting International Journal of Project Management. And project management is a very lively field with many great journals. such as Project Management Journal or also International Journal of Managing Projects in Business. And so we kind of consider, if I'm not talking about International Journal of Project Management, which is the leading journal in the field, we are considering ourselves as a management journal, but with a very specific focus. And this focus is managing projects, programs, portfolios, project-oriented organizations, and also project society. So that means our focus is project-related. I would say the contemporary view on that is very much projects as temporary organizations. What we are aiming for as project management is a very interdisciplinary field. We are also aiming for bridging out into organizational behavior, human resource management, strategy, innovation, change management. Also entrepreneurship is a possibility to bridge out to. Here are some key performance indicators. It's quite a tradition of this journal. And as you can see, it is published not only by Elsevier, but in cooperation with two project management associations, APM and International Project Management Association. So we have kind of always had a link to practice, and we do consider that as an asset, that we are not only looking for very sound contributions, but nothing is more practical as a good theory. So it also means that we would like to have papers that are of practical relevance. We have 8 issues per year, about 10 papers, and actually we have quite a high submission rate with about 1,000 to 1,200, depends a little bit on the year. And this is why my first job as the editor-in-chief is to be quite rigorous with the desk rejection. And we have a relatively high rate with some 81%. That also means that I really look whether the paper fits into the scope of the journal and also has the potential of making an interesting contribution. We are mainly looking for empirical papers. We are very open to the approaches and so qualitative, quantitative, also mixed methods. We are very open as long as the research approach is transparent and follows a certain rigor. We also do review papers and conceptual papers, but all our papers need to make a considerable contribution. So that's sometimes difficult to explain and convey to especially PhD students, which are very, very welcome to submit their research into this journal. That literature reviews as a basis are not so easily turned into review papers because they really need to make a theoretical and strong contribution. Acceptance rate is about 6%, so 5 to 60% depends also on the year. And what I'm also trying to be very quick with the first decision. So actually here it says time to the first decision is some 3.5 weeks. Actually, that's an indicator that is kind of mixing together two things. The one is actually the desk rejection, which I'm really trying to be very fast within a week. And the other key performance indicator that is mixed in is actually the first decision that comes after the first review. Yeah, so this is normally, you must probably think that this will take, if it goes further, the first decision you can count is probably after some 8 weeks, something like that. Yeah, impact factor is quite high, and we have increased in impact factor over the years. So we are actually quite highly ranked in the management journal categories, and we also are showing here the site score, because I would also like to make it clear to you where we are linking in. We are also linking into business and international management, and we are linking into management of technology and innovation. So that's kind of where we are listed in this in these lists. We have social media appearance, so you can visit us on Twitter. And what can also be very useful is the initiative we have done for a couple of months now. I would say starting last year, we have published quite a lot of editorials giving guidance what we expect if you hand in a case study research, what we consider as a proper quantitative study. So there's a lot of resources, and we also join forces with other project management journals in a YouTube channel, where you also find videos that especially give guidance to PhD students or new researchers who would like to publish in our field. Yeah, I'm very happy for any questions you have to me, and I'm looking forward to the discussion.
Okay, thank you everyone for great presentations. If you could all switch on your cameras again, so everybody can see everyone from the audience side. Okay, everybody's back. We already had a couple of really interesting questions coming in, and for now I'm going to go through a little bit in the order in which we received those questions, starting with a question by William Foster, who I think probably had to leave us, but there were a couple of votes in favor. This was a question around his particular interest in church leadership and organizational culture, and I guess it's a really good question to stand in for situations where you may not be covering a mainstream management subject. How do you make this relevant? He says his PhD was a qualitative study of the leadership and culture of a major denomination church, spanning over a century, brought together theological, sociological, and business fields. Sorry, and my screen just jumped. Hello. And this made the research unique but hard to place, he felt. And he was wondering what sort of management journal likes topics like that. And I'm going to go to Chris first to give us a potential answer to that.
Yeah, thanks. So it's a good question, and I hope I'm not sure if I can give an inclusive or conclusive answer, but in general, we are open to any sort of phenomena that have an organizational relevance. So management studies does not mean, and we elaborate exactly on this in the editorial that I mentioned, it doesn't mean a business manager in a business context. So all kinds of organizations need to be managed, and whether that person is explicitly called a manager or if it's a priest, a priest needs to manage the church, so to say, simply speaking, right? So we're having a managerial problem here that can be tackled. I think the question that needs to be kind of where a good answer needs to be found is, what is this a case of in terms of an organizational or management theory? So if you have this seemingly very interesting context from the church and religious studies and so on, if you can convincingly argue it's a case of one of the theories that our readers are familiar with, and we can learn a lot by infusing kind of our known theoretical apparatus, like in the specific niche, with insights from a different field. So you're crossing a bit the boundaries, but you're making the insights from that other field, religious studies and what you mentioned in your particular case, you're making that insightful for a management and organization theory audience. That can be very illuminating. So, and there are quite a few studies that draw on research from there's an AMR on quantum physics and how that matters for management. So that's a very exotic example maybe, but there's certainly many successful papers that kind of bring together two concepts, and one is kind of an established management theory, and the other one is something from another field, such as psychology or so. And if that can be done, and insights for management scholars can be generated based on that kind of less familiar empirical context, that can be very illuminating, I would say.
Great, thank you, Chris. That's a good example of how this may apply to a number of different topics that may not be quite so mainstream, not just the church. I'm going to Doug next.
Thanks very much. That was a great response. I'll add briefly that, newer topic areas are really great ones to focus on. So if you have a new area like this, people will get excited about it. So it's not a bad thing, it's a good thing. Just for curiosity's sake, I went to the BJM webpage and typed in religion in the search item. 90 papers came up, 90. So you should do the same. And so to see if your topic's going to fit with the journal, go to that journal's webpage, do a search. Likewise, I encourage people to go to Google Scholar to see. That also helps to identify, which area your journal or your paper might fit well with. And then as you're crafting your paper for submission, make sure you take a look at prior papers in the same journal to see if you're contributing to conversations that are within that journal. And so don't be discouraged by new areas. That's definitely something that people get excited about. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Doug. And I think we've got a sort of question on the flip side of that a little bit later. But next, I wanted to go to Zuba's question, who says her work consists of psychology and entrepreneurship, but she finds that she often gets responses from management journal that it's more for a psychology journal, what she's writing, whereas the psychology journals tell her actually it's more in scope for a management journal. And she's really wondering how can she get out of that uncomfortable place in the middle. So if it's okay, I'll first go to Marian with this one.
This is a question that I have a lot of sympathy with because I have traveled this journey myself. So I think it's a question that a lot of people might have in their minds. I think a lot of this actually just goes back to, if you like, the kind of standard ground of the different disciplines. Psychology is as close to a physical science as you can get without being a physical science. If you look at its methods, if you look at its paradigmatic underpinnings, basically it's positivist and it's usually quantitative. Whilst there's still quite a strong element of that in management research, we are more qualitative, more sociological rather than psychological in our explanations often. And I think that does mean that you're kind of falling between two stools there, and you're not quite psychological enough for the psychology journals, but you're not quite fitting for the more management journals. There isn't a simple answer to that. I think the only thing I would say is that you have to go the extra mile or even the extra couple of miles in really explaining and demonstrating why it is worthwhile for the reader to make the effort of understanding a complex psychological argument in a management journal where they wouldn't usually find one, or why the management aspects, the entrepreneurial aspects of what you're doing are sufficiently psychological for the psychological journal. So you just have to do that bit extra to explain why you're publishing where you are, why it's a good fit, or why it actually adds value in that context. Not a simple answer, I'm afraid, but I do sympathise with the problem. And I think, am I right that Thomas is actually going to comment from an entrepreneurial point of view, Stephanie?
Correct, yes.
Yeah.
Well, with psychology specifically, the situation is easier with entrepreneurship because we deal with people. We also deal with companies, but we are used to deal with people. So psychologists have quite a strong position in entrepreneurship. But I think the question is actually quite topical and more general than just about psychology. I mean, I'll give you an example. I was actually, for this session, I was handling a paper as an editor, which is on the borderline between criminology and entrepreneurship. And then I'm getting comments from the reviewers, and basically I can see, I get mix of reviewers, some more on the entrepreneurship side, some, but I also wanted to make sure that I have feedback from the background discipline as well. And I can see that I can see this is a very delicate balance, and you often have this, but those often are at the same time very interesting papers. So at the end of the day, and that was actually the story with the paper I was having today. They got some highly risky revision offer, because at the end of the day, if the idea sounds really novel, really fresh, if there is a feeling by the editors that this is something new, the editors will overcome this kind of tension. I ultimately, the editor's decision is the final one. I had two reviewers recommending rejection. One is the other way around. One recommending rejections, two recommending revision. And often I reject the paper if I have such a combination, but quite often. But in that case I did not, because simply there was something interesting in the paper. So it's about and also, to be honest, if you get rejection letters, sometimes editors will make it convenient for themselves. So the real reason may not be really that it was multidisciplinary. That once you want to reject the paper and you have reviewers telling you to reject the papers, you just fall back on their comments, because it takes a lot of time to explain your own argument. I'm not saying I'm doing it myself much, but you are tempted to do that. So the real reason why the paper is rejected may actually be deeper. Maybe that there is nothing really original and groundbreaking for a top journal. It's the editors tend to free write on the reviewers, but the deep reasons may be slightly more complex why the paper is rejected. I think it goes back to the fundamental point about novelty and contribution.
Okay, thank you, Tomek. And Marian wanted to come in on the issue.
Yeah, just one very quick comment to add to what Tomek's already said. One of the problems with papers like this is finding people to review, finding crossover reviewers. So if when you write your cover letter, you can actually suggest people who might be suitable to review your paper, that might help you get beyond a desk rejection, because you're actually just giving them a steer as to where they can send it. Just a thought.
Okay, thank you, Marian. That's super helpful. Zuba, I hope that has given you some new pointers. I'd like to move on to a question that's been upvoted quite a bit by Professor Martin Spring on the Joya methodology. Obviously, that's a very specific methodology. Some people may already know what we're talking about. For others, this may be something far beyond the area they normally work in. So the question is, the Joya methodology and associated ways of representing analysis in qualitative work is becoming more widely used, for example, in qualitative research in his own domain of operations management. What is your view of this? Does it provide transparency and evidence of rigor, which is the pro view, or does it, this is the very much arguing against view, stifle innovative thinking? It might also help to give visualizations of analytical processes. Other people say it really clutters a paper with diagram. So you can see there's a really big debate around Joya, its usefulness, particularly in qualitative research. Chris, can I come to you with this one first?
Sure. So what we certainly see that it is becoming kind of the mainstream practice and way of analyzing qualitative data. So I get only qualitative papers for JMS, because that's kind of my area. I don't get any quant papers, and almost all the qualitative papers that I get have that. And you can certainly argue about kind of the downsides of that. I would say in isolation, and if it's well executed, it can be an extremely helpful tool, methodological tool. What's important is that this data structure, which is kind of the Joya framework on one slide, that's kind of your first step towards something else. And that something else is typically some sort of model, whether that is even a process model or another framework or something that depicts relationships, that should come after your Joya table, so to say. I think I do agree that it's becoming a bit overused because, well, everyone uses it and it's just the template, and qualitative research kind of typically has benefited from not having a template. So you're trying to kind of force fit your data into that framework, which does make a lot of sense in many cases, but maybe not so much in other cases. However, if I would say, my honest opinion is, if you are particularly a junior scholar and you think it makes sense with respect to your data, I would use it, because it is kind of also what reviewers are used to and what they expect. And so it's certainly the less risky strategy. Maybe you don't win the award for the most innovative paper, but you're using a method that people are used to and they're familiar with, and it's the less riskier strategy in that sense. I would recommend it for junior scholars that do in fact have more pressure to get published. I mean, that's a fact, right? And whether we like that or not, but that's a different discussion. So that's my take on it. Maybe the others have something else to say on it as well. I mean, we can talk forever about that, but
just checking. Anybody else would like to come in on the Joya method and Chris's points? Just give me a wave. Nope. So you can see there is a wide-ranging debate around this method, and it's become very, very established. So it's an interesting one. It's probably worthwhile considering that, depending on the journal you're submitting to. So most of the journals represented here have given you already a bit of a pointer of what kind of submissions they're looking for. Moving on to a question by Emily Bacon, who asked a question that's almost the flip side of a question we had earlier, which is really a general question she's posing to all of you. It's how an author can tell when a research area has been analyzed too much or too many times. So in contrast to something that is new and maybe unusual and not so much something that you expect to see in management, what about something very established? She's saying she's a clear theoretical contribution in a particular paper, but she keeps on receiving comments that the topic has already been empirically analyzed to a sufficient extent. What about, how to deal with such a situation where people may say this is a well-grazed field? Martina, can I come to you with that?
Yeah, we do have in project management very specific topics that are really, really over-researched. Yeah, for instance, project success is such a topic. Yeah, just taking it as an example to make it obvious. And to receive now the 115th paper on project success in a very specific context does not make a very considerable contribution. However, I think, and for instance, we just have a call out on papers for project success. Also these kind of traditional topics where there's a lot of research, they can offer new contributions and novelty if you go in with a very, very complete new theory, with a very, very complete new pair of classes. Yeah, so I think it really depends always on the research question you are proposing, whether it really can bring novelty, or editors might say it's an over-researched topic.
Okay, thank you, Martina. Doug, you wanted to come in on that as well?
Yeah, sure. Nobody likes a paper that they think is a Me Too paper. So if you're redoing something that someone else has already done, then that's not good. So you need to pitch your paper in a way that is not sold as a Me Too paper. And, for topics that have been done frequently, that can get tough, because it's possible that, some reviewer might read the paper as saying that, well, the prior theory isn't very good, and so my theory is better. And that's going to mean fewer citations for your reviewers. So you have to be crafty in a way that you're not stepping on your reviewers' toes, so to speak. That's a fine line to cross. You should do your best to read the paper, your own paper, many times to make sure that reviewers think of it as a novel paper that isn't written in a way that's overly offensive to reviewers. The other sort of fun thing that I just wanted to mention is that someone said, well, you know, you can suggest reviewers. And what I've noticed often, not just at BGM, but other journals that I edit, is that, you know, the suggested reviewers, I might take one or two, because we always take three reviewers. I'm not going to take 3 suggested reviewers, maximum 1 or 2. But frequently, but almost more often than not, the suggested reviewers are more harsh than the ones that I've picked. So you know, you have to also think of who your friends actually are. So keep that in mind, that suggesting people to review your papers may not work out for you.
Okay, thank you, Doug. We've got a couple of general questions. I would really like to kind of wrap them all together and maybe also rephrase them slightly. So we have a question here about what excites editors most about a submission, what jumps out? And Amanti Gupta asked for the top 3 things an editor looks for. I'm kind of tempted here to also rephrase the question and maybe also say, what are the absolute do not do these things? What are the 3 things you should completely avoid if you submit something? Whether these are very well-established things or personal bugbears of the specific editors. Sarah, can I come to you first with that one?
Yes, of course. Thank you. So I'd like to start with what excites the editor, because obviously if we have around 30 papers coming in a week, you know, what is it that makes you think, oh, that's interesting? And I think that's the key, that the papers that I suddenly sort of sit up there, oh, I haven't thought about that before, or oh, that's interesting, there's something new and novel here. And I think that comes back to the earlier paper about religion and the management of a religious institution, because again I think, oh right, I hadn't really thought about, you know, religious institutions in that way or something like that. So sometimes when I think it's a paper, it's a little bit different. It's a little bit different to papers that's maybe bringing 2 things together that haven't been brought together before as well. Also something that is quite current and topical, that's perhaps been in the news. I might actually kind of, perhaps put a caveat on that, in that I'm getting an awful lot of papers on COVID and flexible working and so on now. And I'm wondering, you know, well, actually that doesn't feel very novel anymore. But, you know, how could you make a different take on something like that? So yes, so relevance I think is important, topicality, etc. In terms of do's and don'ts, one thing I see quite a lot in papers is that you're starting to read it and there's a question, think good, that's a question, and then there's another question, and then another question, and then another question. And you could say the same with hypotheses. Sometimes you get up to 10 or 12 hypotheses, and I think, gosh, that's an awful lot for one paper, for one quite short paper. So try to keep your questions quite concise and clear right from the beginning. Flag them up right from the beginning in the abstract and all the way through. Really try to make your paper as reader friendly, and you can substitute reader with editor, editor friendly as possible right from the start. The abstract is extremely important, I would say. You know, what are you doing? How are you doing it? Why are you doing it? Etc. Then what did you find? What is the contribution? Flag that right up. One thing I notice quite often is that contributions get left right until the end, and I can sort of understand that in a way that, you know, it's nice to have a ta-da element at the end. But I think, you know, as a reader, you'll think, where is this going? Where is this going? So perhaps not even saying my contribution will be X, but kind of hinting at that by saying what communities you're talking to, what literatures you're adding to, what debates you're adding to, etc., etc. It is really important in that respect. And I think the other connected point about lots of questions is lots of concepts and lots of ideas. I find papers are often just crammed with ideas and concepts, and it's quite hard to kind of disaggregate and think, well, where is the contribution here? Because with each concept you have a literature review, and then, you know, within a quite short paper, there isn't really room to do justice to review all the literature and so on. So try to keep, you know, your concepts manageable and that they really work with your research question and what you want to find out. Another thing I look at quite a lot as an editor is the reference list. Again, I think I mentioned that in my presentation. I do like to see the journal referenced, and that's to show that it is actually the paper is relevant to the is sort of relevant to the journal. It's plugging into debates within the journal. I'm not so worried about that from a citation point of view. It's really just to show that the author is interested in the journal and is working with the journal in terms of their developing their ideas. I also notice quite often in a reference list that there are a lot of older references. Obviously, seminal papers are good, but sometimes, you know, there is perhaps a tendency to keep to the same, always using the same authors in a certain area, where actually there is newer work coming through as well. So, you know, be aware of that. The editorial letter, again, you know, I think it's just good practice to write one, because that's then you're actually telling somebody else what your paper is about, and you're telling yourself that too. So I think that's quite a good thing to draw out. What is the main points of the paper? And then perhaps after reading that, after writing that, have a look at the abstract to check that all that's there in the abstract as well. And keywords, I think keywords are very important because they're important for selecting reviewers. And I quite often notice that the keywords given don't really fit with the paper itself, or that there is something really important in the paper that isn't flagged up in the keywords, and that might mean that we miss, you know, sending it to the right reviewers. Okay, I think that's a whirlwind view of some of the do's and don'ts there.
All right, Sarah. So this, I think, demystifies a little bit the process, but it also highlights there's clearly quite a lot of knowledge and skill around getting a good publication together, worthwhile, making sure that if there is a training from a journal or general one at your university, or you have more experienced courses, to also make sure you learn about all these little things. I quickly wanted to go to Marian, because she wanted to add a little bit also in terms of journal remit, which is another very important one.
Yeah, this is going to sound incredibly basic, but given the number of papers that we reject at IJMR because they have an empirical contribution and we are a review journal, it sounds obvious, but please, please, please read the remit of the journal and make sure you are on the remit of the journal, because otherwise it is a very quick desk rejection, which is pretty depressing. So obvious, but important.
Yeah, thank you very much, Marian. And obviously you had quick presentations by the journals, and many of the editors highlighted what types of articles, opinion pieces, methods pieces, review pieces that they're willing to accept, and that is a very important one. We have another question by Christina Unterhitzenberger, and this is one that is specific to more specialist journals. Obviously today we have some general and some more specific journals on the panel, and she's really interested in how specialist and generalist fields and journals interact. She's asking specifically about project management and entrepreneurship, asking how do we get more interaction between these fields and general management? Subsequently, how can we enable researchers to publish in the general management journals as well as in the specialist journals? And also, how can we get general management scholars to bridge into and make a contribution to a specialist area? So if it's okay, I'll first go to perhaps Martina, because she represents a field that is not just a specialist field, but also a field that she introduced with a strong practitioner focus.
Thank you for this question. Project management is an applied science, and actually what we would like to prevent is to only be in a silo. Yeah, so we had a tendency in project management for quite a while that it was only a silo. So actually this is why the journal has broken with this tradition and is now really reaching out to innovation, entrepreneurship, you call it. Yeah. So for instance, we had a special issue on project management and innovation last year. So actually, this is one of the ways, and at least, I mean, this is my contribution as being in project management, that I'm really encouraging this way of also have a conversation with neighboring fields, have a conversation and allow also for theories that are outside project management to be applied. And I always hope that this also goes into the different direction, yeah. So that also management journals will become even more interested in project management, so general management journals, and we have grown much beyond just mathematical scheduling and costs and everything you might kind of think project management is, yeah. So kind of also probably helping project management to get a little bit more recognized in management fields.
Thank you, Martina. Tomek, coming to you, the perspective from entrepreneurship.
Yeah, I mean, I think the entrepreneurship was a very highly specialized field some 20 years ago. It was in a small field, and now I think it's the third largest academic division at the moment. So it's less of a problem for us anymore. But I think from the author's point of view, again, at the end of the day, you want to be read and you want to be cited, and therefore, I think, unfortunately, I'm not saying it's good or bad, but I'm saying that the specialization is unavoidable. Because if you think from the point of view of the discussion and you hope your article will contribute to a discussion, simply if you are writing an article which has some entrepreneurship aspect, face it, you will have more chance to be cited, picked up if you publish it in JBV or DP. And I also think that actually the general management journals, they also have a profile. It's not really that if you look more carefully at the top general management journals, including, I would say, Chris may contradict me, but including JMS, I think in all of those journals, you find some teams. They just cannot, they don't publish on everything. So from the author point of view, from the submission point of view, I mean, the first simple trivial rule is check where people publish the stuff you are writing about. And the best thing is to check it before you actually start writing your article in full, because again, that will be slightly different style, slightly different discussion, and the good fit with the journal you are submitting to is absolutely essential. And I think Sarah said that I have sympathy with this. You basically want to contribute to the discussion in the journal you are submitting to. I mean, the worst thing to do is to submit to a journal you don't read any papers from, because at the end of the day, reviewers of your paper are likely to be authors in that journal. I mean, I just ignore whatever reviewers people recommend. Basically, I never use them, to be honest, because I think I can make my better choices myself. And often those are choices, not necessary actually. It's a complicated story in EDP, because we deliberately try to extend the reviewers we are. So we actually, it's not exactly true that we use the authors as reviewers, but nevertheless they are in the system. They're likely to come up, and put your keywords in Google Scholar and then narrow it down to a journal you are submitting, and there is a fair chance those will be your reviewers. Not necessarily cite them for the sake of citing them, but more like look at what those people talk about. What are the topics that may excite them? Recent publications. And that will tell you what journal you should submit. If you will find it in the top general journals, which is likely, submit to the journal, submit to JMS, submit to Journal of Management or else, or Academy of Management Journal. But I would argue we are all specialized, basically.
Okay.
That's
Thank
it.
you. And I thought it'd be really useful then to hear from an editor who is having a more general remit. If it's okay, I'll first go to Doug and then to Chris, if that's all right.
Sure, I'll be brief. You're writing to the readers of the journal. And so if it's a general journal, it can be helpful to communicate something that people that aren't precisely in the area that you're working in might find something interesting and a takeaway for your paper. So, for example, if it is an entrepreneurship question and submitted to BGM, we definitely consider those papers, publish many entrepreneurship papers, but there is a tendency that those papers will communicate something to a broader audience. And so if it's a little more narrowly focused, it still might be a fit for the journal, but indeed the reviewers and editors are going to be thinking, exactly, is this paper appropriate for the readership of the journal? So when you cast your paper, pitch your paper in the abstract, the introduction, you should explain what are the implications more broadly and why would a broad audience, the readership, find your question and analysis and methods and the like to be interesting. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Doug. Chris?
Yeah, just adding to that. So I fully agree with what Thomas and Douglas said. But beyond that, just particularly for the more junior scholars that are listening, and given how many papers that are submitted to any journal are rejected, if you frame an article for a particular journal and it gets rejected there, that does not at all mean it's dead or so. So you would typically, just send it to another journal. It doesn't mean you just take the paper and submit it immediately elsewhere. You would work on the paper and see, okay, what is my alternative journal? And that does not even have to be like if you submitted it to JMS, being a general management journal, and it's rejected, it can of course be another general management journal, but it can also be a specialty journal, for example, or the reverse. You can have a paper that was, for example, rejected at a CSR sustainability journal, but you think, well, if we add this tweak and twist here and there, maybe we can tailor it to a general management audience. So it can go in both directions. And it's important to engage with your new target journal after a rejection and cover the points and address the points that have been discussed. So what is the conversation in that new journal that I can contribute to, and so and so. But in almost all of the cases, there are multiple journals which are potential outlets for your work. None of my papers has like ever only fitted to one specific journal, but typically there are more. So keep that in mind. Of course, it is important to demonstrate the fit to a journal, but if it doesn't work in a particular journal, you can almost certainly fit it to another journal.
Okay, great. So you can already see that journals have very different remits, very different understandings, very different topics, histories. So it's worthwhile understanding the differences between these. I think our editors here have all kind of given you a really good flavor for the kind of journals and fields that they represent. I wanted to pick up quickly on something that was posted in the discussion by Martin Spring, highlighting the comments earlier by Chris on the Joya method, highlighting he was somewhat alarmed to hear that the Joya method is so widely used for qualitative papers. So going back to an earlier question. But yeah, I think we've posted that, so Chris has seen that. Tomek also highlighted another paper for entrepreneurship, which I put into the response to the question, which is a question around what excites people most about a submission. There's an excellent paper called Simple Rules, Templates and Heuristics that's been published in terms of having a good entrepreneurship paper. And I think other journal editors probably can point to similar resources. So it's not just meeting the editors, there's also a lot of interesting material out there. We're coming up to our last 10 minutes and I wanted to go through what is our last question, really, which has been posted by Madeline, and she's asking the editors what advice they would tell themselves as their younger self about publishing research effectively. And I thought this might be a really nice question to end on and give all editors an opportunity to talk a little bit about what are the key things they feel they know now that they wish they'd known as a younger scholar. And I'm going to go through pretty much in the order I see this on my screen, which might be totally different from your order. I'm going to start with Sarah first and then go through. So if you could all give me a brief sense, we've got about 10 minutes left. What are the key tips that you feel you've learned from being an editor?
Thank you, Stephanie. So the first one relates to the point Chris was making before about don't give up, keep going on a paper. I do regret actually giving up too early on papers early on, or sending them as book chapters, or just leaving them in a bottom drawer in some cases. So do reframe them. But obviously, from an editor's perspective, I would say make sure that they fit the journal you're sending them to, and make sure they're formatted to the journal. And again, coming back to my bugbear about referencing, make sure the journal you're sending it to is highly referenced. Quite often you can tell that a paper was sent to a different journal before because it's still referenced in that journal style, etc., and has a lot of references to that journal. Connected to that is ask other people to read your papers. I was too shy to do that, and I would really ask, I think it's really important to get other people to do that. Write about what you're interested in. That comes through, that gives you the, oh, that's interesting element when you're really interested in something, and that shines through, in my opinion. Get into the reviewing process or the editorial process as early as you can. Do start reviewing papers, because you then see the other side of it. You start to learn what makes a good paper or what doesn't. You see other people's reviews and so on, so you get the other side of things from there. And again, I was probably a bit too shy to do that, or to ask editors if I could review for them. So
thank you, Sarah, that's really great advice. Thank you. Dermot, did you want to come in on that one?
Oops.
I totally agree with Sarah. I would say don't give up and don't give in. The selection pressures in academia are designed to knock the stuffing out of us, and most importantly, to knock ideas out of us. The discipline, the entire academic discipline needs new ideas. It needs fresh ideas. It needs new ways of thinking. And it's really important that if you have an idea you're passionate about, to be bold and to stick with it, and don't give up. I just remember from when I started out in academia, when I moved from an engineering career, there are a lot of people advising you in a way to kind of knock these new ideas out. So if you're out there and people are saying that to you, don't give up.
Thank you, Dermot. That's really nice to hear. Martina.
Well, a lot has been said already. I would say the basis is an excellent research piece. Only excellent research pieces lead to excellent papers. And I would have loved in my career to get better teaching in research methodology and also in writing papers. So I think this is what I would recommend to all new researchers and to myself when I was young to really get the basics right and read, see where you fit into which journals you fit in, read them, see how others do it, but come up with your own ideas.
Thank you, Martina. And just to plug our great association BAM here, I think we're doing quite a bit, particularly since the pandemic, but also before, on research training. And I think what Martina is saying, that kind of looking out for new resources, something's been posted in the chat by George Freines as well for IJMR. Engage with your colleagues who have great ideas for where you could find more help. Let's move on to Chris.
Yeah, I mean, many good things to which I agree have been said already. So one thing that I find very important is particularly when you're facing a rejection or a very critical reviewer, just don't take it personal. It's not against you, but it's against a particular argument or methodological approach or whatever that you're making in the paper, and just don't be bothered too much by a rejection. And we all get that. I mean, I see that as an editor also, how many rejections are given to very senior and very experienced people, and how many papers are accepted that are written by junior people. So there's an influence, of course, but just don't take it too personal, and you can be mad maybe 2 hours and then you move forward to a new endeavor, so to say. And my other advice is to team up and work with other people. And I mean, many of you do that probably already. But I'm always a friend of bigger teams, meaning like you have 1 or 2 or maybe even 3 co-authors working on a paper. And select your co-authors wisely. So my personal rule is that I only work with people that I like, because you have to work with these people for a long time and quite intensively. And if you don't like each other, it's not going to work. It's not going to work out. So try to early on establish good relationships with potential co-authors, and these don't necessarily have to be kind of supervisors or so, but as you grow into academia, you're gonna have, and hopefully we can meet in real life, in real terms, maybe in the next conference season, we'll see. Try to establish a network of people that can be potential co-authors, and in one project you're in the lead, and in another project somebody else is in the lead, and you kind of just distribute the workload a little bit. And it's just more fun if it's with people that you enjoy working together.
Thanks, Chris. We've got 3 more people to go. We have, I think, less than 3 minutes. I understand we're going to have a hard cutoff. So maybe if I could ask Tomek, then Doug, and then Marian to very briefly maybe add to that.
Okay, I'll make 3 short comments. First, spread your risks. When you finish a PhD, don't send everything to the top journals, because you will wait too long. You need some publications. So make those decisions. That's the first comment. The second comment is continuity and focus. If something worked, stick with this, both in terms of the topic, in terms of the people you work with. Continuity and focus is essential. Once you found what works, just follow success. The third comment is never ever send the same paper. I think Chris made a similar point already. Never ever send the paper again without working on the comments. Always take comments seriously. Because you may be annoyed by them and so on, but they will help. I'll finish.
Thanks, Tomek. Doug?
So it's hard to follow at this stage. So many great comments by so many great people. So some things that I'd like to think about is for your abstract and introduction. You're extremely lucky if someone reads your paper. So don't discourage them by having a poorly written abstract and introduction. Like really write it, rewrite it, make sure it's absolutely perfect. Second thing, never treat a paper like a line on your CV. At the end of the day, people are going to count citations, not number of publications. So think of long term. And what goes along with that is integrity. So you got to maintain your data sets. Your papers have to be replicable. Think of everything that maintains your integrity. Lastly, be a good citizen. So be nice to people. Give people good comments on their papers. If someone asks you to review, don't be late. Give a really good report. Be helpful. And then it's going to come back and help you later.
Thanks, Doug. Great comments. Marian, quick, short.
I can do this in 1 sentence. Have the courage to find the balance between the ref game that we have to play and actually publishing what matters to you in the best place for that particular piece of research. And that comes back to integrity that Douglas was just talking about as well.
Thank you very much, Marian. That's a wonderful comment to end on. It's absolutely fantastic. Thank you all for doing a really great session. I know not all of you are necessarily on the platform. We had a number of thank yous from people who really enjoyed the session very much. It was an absolute pleasure doing this with you. I really feel I learned a lot from hearing about your journals and your background. So thank you for making the time. Thank you for being at the BAM conference. We all hope to see you again here soon. And thanks to our audience and great questions. I think we're going to close here. Otherwise, I have to stop mid-sentence. So thank you, everyone. And yeah, enjoy the rest of the conference.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.